with the Himadri Sarkar Memorial Oration, and I request the President of the Urological Society of India, Professor P.B. Singh, and the Secretary, Dr. S.K. Singh, to take this session over.
May I invite Dr. Kotwal to come on the dais, please? I would request Dr. S.K. Singh to have a brief introduction of our orator.
I think Dr. Colonel Kotwal doesn't need any introduction to this audience. He is our immediate past president, has many of credentials of his to his credit. With short brief, because I have already read his citation yesterday, I will ask Dr. Kotwal to start his oration, to deliver his oration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, sir. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. As I had made a plea last time that this should not necessarily have come to me, but for various reasons I am here like a bad coin, and you will have to. We're here this morning to commemorate the memory of Dr. Himadri Sarkar, who was one of the founder members of the Urological Society of India. And that is this all too brief life, and to sum up his life and times, I don't think I could do better than to quote the famous lines from Ben Jonson: "It is not in growing like a tree in bulk that doth make man better be, nor standing long an oak 300 year, to fall a log at last, dry, bald and sere. A lily of a day is fairer far in May, although it fall and die that night, it was the plant and flower of light." Dr. Sarkar leaves two important legacies behind him. One is this lecture, which perpetuates his memory, and the other is his illustrious son Kalyan, who is with us and who is one of India's best known urologists. In choosing the subject for my talk today, I thought I would get away from the usual goulash of kidney, prostate cancer that we keep on talking about. This was something which intrigued me, and as I read more about it, I was appalled by my own ignorance. And it is for this reason that I had appealed last time that it would have been wonderful to have an expert in the field talking to us. I am encouraged because our guest speaker yesterday, Dr. Balram, alluded to nanomedicine. I am discouraged because I see here in the audience Gopal Badlani, who's perhaps forgotten more about nanomedicine that I have learned. So what you're going to have is second-hand knowledge. Let's go back to basic fundamentals. What is nanomedicine? Remember that all matter is composed of atoms, and there are just about 92 elements. There's nothing more, there is no 93rd element discovered so far. And that all these atoms are very pure in existence today as they were when time began. And that, what is a nanometer? It is 1/1000th of a meter. Remember that a human hair is about 60,000 nanometers in diameter. So a nanometer is quite small. A DNA molecule is that small. A capillary is just 2 or 3 microns, and a red blood cell is about 7 microns. So it is a very small distance indeed. Now, how do we know that these things happen? There is a device called an atomic force microscope. If you have a probe with just a single atom at the tip and run it over a surface, there is an electron flow which causes it to go up and down, and therefore you can map the surface contour of any flow. A more interesting thing is the tunneling microscope. This was discovered in 1989, and if you pass a weak electric current, you can actually displace these atoms, and in doing so you can etch lines. So you can imagine that this is the beginning of not a microcircuit or an integrated circuit, but a nanocircuit. And the first 3 letters ever etched in this fashion in history were predictably IBM. Now when these atoms are displaced, you can assemble them, and you can assemble them in a way you like, and that is what is nano fabrication. It apparently is not a very big machine, it's a desktop model, and if you have more and more such desktop models, you can assemble these nanostructures in vast numbers, and it is prophesied that one day we will see giant nano factories turning out billions of structures, and there is no pollution, there is no waste, because these atoms can be precisely aligned. And what you have is a nanoparticle to begin with, and very interesting nanoparticles have already been devised. This is a buckyball, rather irreverently named after that famous architect Buckmaster Fuller, who invented the geodesic dome. And this earned a Nobel Prize, came from Rice University, and is composed of 62 atoms. It is a surprisingly strong structure. It has been projected against a wall at 1800 miles an hour, and it bounces back, doesn't get destroyed. It has a number of uses, and it is actually the third pure form of carbon. You have diamond on one hand, you have pure coal on the other, and there was no other pure carbon structure devised till this thing came along, and this is known as a buckyball. You can also construct tubes out of this, and that is what is a nanotube. So therefore you have tubes, you can have single wire tubes, or you can have multiple wire tubes, and they have certain very interesting properties. It is extremely strong. It can conduct electricity without offering any resistance at all. So there's no loss by resistance. It can be pressurized, and you can even say, it might appear it's very difficult to assemble, but there are procedures to self-assemble these nanotubes of various lengths and sizes. And you can, as you can see, that if you see the tensile strength of steel is 1, the tensile strength of a single wire nanotube is about 150. So it is an extremely strong structure. As you can imagine, if you can have a wire made out of a nanotube which you can barely see, it conducts electricity without offering any resistance and is much, much stronger than steel. Another interesting device is this, what is known as Q dot. It has got the property to fluoresce. That means it absorbs light of one frequency and emits light of another frequency, and for a greater period of time. So this is very highly sensitive for cellular imaging, and it can be designed to actively target a cancer cell. Nanoshell, we have all heard about, we've been reading about, and you see, it can be used both for cancer cell detection as well as therapy. That means it can kill a cell because it can enter a cell. And as you must have read recently, that scientists, particularly in the current status, is that they've been used to treat kidney cancer in mice, and very effectively. The first trials have been published, and prostate cancer as well. The first human trial has been conducted. The results have come out in 2007 for locally recurrent prostate cancer, and that is a phase 1 trial done in humans. So that is nanoshell. Now, these are basic devices. Can you make devices, I mean, apart from the particles, by assembling atoms in a particular way? The first tangible result is going to come in the field of computers. We have seen that the first computer weighed 5 tons. Now our computer can fit in the palm of our hand. It is envisaged that all the knowledge in the world, whether it be astrology, astronomy, architecture, art, science, what have you, can all be stored in a device as big as a sugar cube. That is what is prophesied. So if that happens, the computers are going to get smaller and smaller, they're going to become faster and faster, and indeed in about the size of a liver cell, you can put a vast amount of information. So this is going to be the immediate benefit in the short term of nanotechnology. And by mid-90s, various other kinds of devices were fabricated, mainly for industrial use. So you have flow valves and pistons and so on and so forth, and micro grippers and stingers and pincers, forceps of various types at a very small scale, a nanoscale. Robotic arms have been devised, and small computers, as I talked about. So this is what is currently on, not medically applied at the present moment, but this is what we're going to have increasing applications. So this is the world's smallest nanomotor. So you can see you can so these things, motion can be applied to these structures, and this is a kind of nanomotor which by application of laser you can get it to move. Can these objects move? Yeah. Various motors and even nanotransporters have been devised, but for medical purposes, what is envisaged is that you implant a motor into a bacterium or a bacterial flagellum into a device. But it is of course unlikely that you will have a nano submarine swimming against the blood current, which appears unlikely because it will not have that much energy. This, gentlemen, is the world's smallest car. And this again was being developed by Rice University in 2005. And what they've done in 2009 is, originally it was made to move by magnetism, but now they've put nanomotors into each of these wheels in 2009. And this is the smallest car in the world. These are buckyballs, which are the wheels, and the motors have been installed. So this is really the smallest car in the world. This is a technology demonstrator. Now, bacterial nanomotors have been devised, so therefore you can have these biological nanomotors implanted into a device and enable it to move. There are a number of nanotechnology-based medicines currently available. Indeed, it has been, I was going through, there are about 600 different applications of nanotechnology currently in use, about 150 related to medicine alone. So a number of these technologies are already finding use, and we're going to have interesting developments in the near future. So what are we looking at? We're going to have various kinds of monitors. We'll have what is called lab on a chip, and therefore chemotherapy, for example, instead of flooding the whole body with toxic chemicals, it will be possible to deliver chemotherapy to the appropriate site. We're going to have flow sensors, delivery systems, insulin pumps which will regulate themselves, and so on and so forth. So various kinds of monitoring devices will come about in the very near future. Now, to give you a glimpse, this is what is in the pipeline, a biosensor comprising of nanoelectric circuits. Now, this is going to be a device 6 centimeters by 5 centimeters implanted subdermally onto the dorsum of the wrist, and there will be a swarm of sensors going through the blood and a small computer embedded, and as you go on you will see that this is what Professor Balram also alluded to yesterday. We are going to see this very shortly, so that all bodily functions, not only bodily functions, but including the chemistry, and that it will not be necessary for the future human to have to go to a laboratory or to give a blood sample, and this is going to give us all the information we need, including a vast amount of biochemical data. But nanomedicine will achieve its true potential only when medical nanobots come into being. And when are they likely to come into being? It is projected that the first nanobots will be operational by 2020. That's not very far away. We are in 2012. So 8 years on, we are going to see the first medical nanobots become operational. That's in the pipeline. And what will these nanobots do? Typically, they'll be very small. They'll be either blood-borne, that means injected into the bloodstream, or non-blood-borne, like in the alimentary tract or in the digestive tract. They will be controlled by an external device. It is proposed that they'll be initially, we thought that they'll be based on oxyglucose, but then what is proposed now is that there'll be an ultrasound control externally, and these will be traveling nanobots. They will travel through the tract and perform various types of tasks which currently we can only dream about. And these nanobots are going to profoundly influence medical practice in this century. Surgery will be performed at the cellular or the molecular level. For example, infections. Infections will be eradicated in minutes. There will be no toxicity. Instead of the long time that we take to control a severe infection with antibiotics and flood the body with it. Cancer cells will be very rapidly destroyed. This is an illustration of what will happen to a diseased RBC, for example. That is an nanobot. It will identify, it will target the cell, the pincers will go in and destroy it. And this is what is going to happen to a cancer cell. These are proliferating cancer cells, and here come the circulating nanobots, which will identify, which will put these pincers into the cytoplasm or into the nucleus and destroy these cells. So that is what is going to happen in the very near future, starting 2020. Interestingly, this has been devised, a thing known as a respirocyte, and this has been designed by Robert Freitas, who's perhaps one of the foremost workers in the field. Now, this is a small device, and it can be pumped full of oxygen. It's going to have inbuilt motors and pumps for both oxygen delivery and carbon dioxide clearance, and just 4.5 ml of blood of this solution can replace the entire blood volume of an adult. Now, interestingly, what is the computation tells us is that if you get an injection of 4.5 ml of this solution intravenously, you can sit at the bottom of the swimming pool without moving for 4 hours, or you can run at top speed for half an hour without drawing a second breath. So imagine that what is going to happen to us, to our sports, or to our divers and so on. It's going to have very simple onboard computers, and which will respond to an ultrasound transducer. The drug is injected intravenously and controlled by an external device. And this is what a respirocyte is going to look like. It's going to be absolutely round, and unlike the flat RBC that we have, and it will pass through the bloodstream. For infections, we are going to have, this is also in the pipeline, has been designed and is about 1,000 times faster than your current antibiotics that are in use. Bacteria will be digested in 30 seconds to form harmless peptides. This is perhaps the most advanced, the chromalocyte, or the cell repair robot. And this is going to, based on the sequence of the human genome, it is going to be customized for the individual, so it will copy the human genome, it will extract the diseased DNA sequence from within the nucleus and inject the healthy genome into it, and this is going to correct aging. Imagine that this is going to correct the ravages of age, and this is really going to, bleeding continues to be a problem in surgery, but we're going to have these circulating robots which are going to be 100 or 1,000 times faster than nature, and a total dose of just about 0.4 ml of these clotocytes will be enough to stop bleeding in 5.5 liters of blood. And this is what a clotocyte is going to do. It's going to lay down fibrin and stop bleeding. Neurons, we know currently, are not capable of being repaired. So any neuronal damage that you have is permanent at the present moment. So a person having a stroke or a spinal cord injury, but here comes this neuron repair robot which identifies the diseased neuron, shoots out these fullerene nanotubes which conduct electrical impulses, and therefore a lot of neuronal damage will be corrected. Now, can we predict the future? Sometimes predictions can go terribly wrong. And I don't think this gentleman ever lived down this particular prediction he made. But there are a number of groups, specialized groups, much better informed than we are, who periodically meet together. There are groups of Nobel laureates and so on, and try and predict the future and try and tell us what is going to happen. And I shall tell you what is like. This is the timeline that has been drawn out. We are somewhere around, this was in 2010, so we're just a little ahead of this. As you can see, most of these devices have already been invented. This is when they were discovered or invented. And the green is when they're going to be commercially available. So as you can see, around 2020, a lot of these things, whether therapeutic nanotubes, dendrimers, and so on and so forth, they are going to be commercially available. So this is a very realistic timeline. What I'm trying to tell you is that this is something that is going to happen very shortly, and unless we are aware of it, we're likely to be overtaken by events. This is what Robert Freitas has to say, that's going to virtually eliminate all the diseases. It is going to prevent pain, and specifically mental abilities are going to be repaired, and this is what is going to happen very soon. And so bacterium-sized robots are going to revolutionize medical care. Surgical interventions will be at the cellular level. Infections will not be a threat. Cancer will cease to exist as a fatal condition. There will be no more heart disease. Metabolic deficiencies like diabetes, which is so common, is going to be undone. All damaged DNA will be repaired, so therefore aging is going to be arrested. Neuronal damage can be reversed. Normal cellular function, this is a field of cryonics, which is quite different from what you're talking about. Aging can be arrested, and this is a very significant thing. There is a lot of research worldwide, as you are aware, and as you know, if you have an open mind and keep looking at journals other than urology, you will be astounded at the phenomenal amount of research that is going on worldwide. And the lead, of course, was in the US. There's a National Nanotechnology Initiative started by Bill Clinton in 2000, and there is a lot of investment. In India too, we have, as even Professor Balram told us yesterday, that nano fabrication and this, a lot of interest in our country as well. There's an enormous amount of research funding. The market is expected to reach $3.1 trillion in 2015. Interesting thing, if you look at the investment in research, US and China, China is coming up and matching the investment in research. So far as nanotechnology is concerned, Russia contributes about 24%, the rest of the world about 20%. Advances in medicine cannot be divorced from society, and there are going to be very startling societal changes in the years to come. By the mid-21st century, gentlemen, there is going to be no food or water shortage. Space travel will become very cheap and safe. Energy will be drawn mainly from the sun, so therefore we are not going to have these thermal projects and dams and so on and so forth as a source of energy, mainly from the sun. A lot of research on trapping solar energy in space with giant-sized mirrors. The trouble is in transmitting that energy down to Earth, and when microwave transmission of electricity is achieved, we will have limitless energy from the sun. A lot of development in solar film research, so every house will get a solar paint which will generate its own electricity. In fact, even roads can be used to generate electricity. So energy will be sourced mainly from the sun, not from what we currently see. Education will become very cheap because all information will be available on the computer. Medical treatment will be cheap and without any side effects. Many extinct plants will be brought back to life. This field of regenerative medicine, and as you have read about, that they're planning to bring back the woolly mammoth in 5 years. So these long extinct species can be brought back to life. There'll be no pollution, no waste. But here we have a huge number of perfectly healthy old people. What does one do with this population? It is expected that the world population will stabilize around 10 billion. We are 7 billion now. It will stabilize around 10 billion and not grow beyond. But then it begs the question of what are we going to do with these enormously fit, mentally agile old people who do not die? There are only 3 solutions, and this is an ethical question really. One, that you stop human reproduction, which is unlikely. 2, that you let the non-productive segment of the population die out, which is not ethically acceptable. And perhaps the third option is to colonize the rest of the solar system. We have heard about this planet being discovered recently, which seems to be habitable. And when space travel becomes cheap, and it is most likely that the human being will colonize the rest of the solar system. Are these people going to be entirely happy? Because technologies can provide perhaps for every need, but can it provide for human greed? Unfortunately, the human being has been cursed by aggression, and through history, man has always tried to destroy man. So one of the dangers of nanotechnology is that supposing the yellow race decides to target the DNA of the black race or something like that, and you blow this smoke across, and which affects the DNA of the opposite party, so perhaps wars will continue and man will kill. But what concerns us today is what is going to be the future of surgery and what are we as surgeons likely to be doing. This gentleman made a very interesting and rather prescient observation, Richard Feynman, who got a Nobel, and he says if surgery is needed, it would be really interesting to swallow the surgeon. Very prescient, made in 59. Oh, I'm running out of time. So, the art of diagnosis, gentlemen, accept it or not, is already going out of our hands, and I expect that in the years to come, a person with flank pain or hematuria would rather go to the computer and get a battery of tests which will be ordained by the insurance companies and by the guidelines that we very enthusiastically churn out. They'll go through the battery of tests and come out with a diagnosis. And this quotation is perhaps, I can't swear by it, but I think Professor Anthony Mundy said this. But with diagnosis rapidly going out of our hands, will therapy also go the same way? I think that these funny backroom boys in their white coats in the laboratory are perhaps going to be the curative scientists of the future. And by 1950s, surgical craft will sadly vanish. It has got a lot of implications. Will the training change? With knowledge available in a sugar cube, will we have time for our hallowed institutions of learning? Will we have time for our venerable professors as they exist today? If medicine is going to be so cheap, can we make a living out of it? This is food for thought. This is what the ultimate surgeon is going to look like in 2050. It's going to be a circulating robot with a receptor for impulses from outside, various kinds of devices, micropincers that go inside cells, and this is Mr. Surgeon of 2050. So, we are on the cusp of enormous and imminent change. And perhaps not in my lifetime, but certainly in your children's lifetimes, they are going to see this coming, and we would be wise to take note of it or suffer obsolescence. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. Only one thing I can say, we are proud to have you as our orator. On behalf of USI, we like to give the